Wind and Tide. Hello and welcome to Family 360,
a podcast of conversations exploring life together,
parenting, and all the ways we are family to each other. I'm Rachel Cram, educator and founding director of Wind and Tide Education Community.
I'm Roy Salmond, audio producer and founder of Whitewater Studios, and together we're the hosts
of Family 360, interviewing specialists,
artists,
and storytellers.
And now for this week's episode.
Dr. Gordon Neufeld is a renowned psychologist and developmental theorist. His book, Hold On to Your Kids, and his ongoing work through the Neufeld Institute provides education and training to parents and professionals around the world.
We were privileged to host Dr. Neufeld as one of our first guests on Family 360, and in the course of that interview, he enthusiastically alluded to new studies that were going on all over the world on the science of play.
True play, as he calls it.
Yes.
His enthusiasm was such that we really wanted to follow up.
And he's such a brilliant man, so playful.
Which is fitting.
And yes, and with a wealth of wisdom to share. So that was a really great motivating factor.
Yeah, so with only a small amount of coercion, we were able to bring him back.
Did we have to coerce him? It was pretty mutual.
Yeah, it was. He's very generous with his time, and it was the COVID part, I think, that made it tricky, but we worked it out. Mm-hmm. We stayed distanced.
Right. So here's our interview with Dr. Gordon Neufeld on the essential nature of play.
And not just play for children, but adults as well.
Which is good to know.
So let's jump into our conversation.
And play.
Dr. Neufeld, thank you so much for this second interview. The first time we interviewed you, we were in your home, which was so lovely. And this time, because of COVID-19, we're needing to be in a more socially distanced environment. But it's so great to be back with you.
My pleasure to be so.
Thank you. Now, you've been very active online during these last months. You put out a number of videos and webinars on parenting in a pandemic. How are you doing through all of this?
I'm doing just fine. It's rather natural for me, actually, to retreat. Personally, I don't mind it at all. I'm busier than ever, but it's a bit of a shock. I had to cancel 2 years worth of trips. In fact, right now I'm supposed to be on a 6-week tour in Europe and in Russia. And so it's a bit of a retreat, but personally, I don't mind it.
Well, I'm sorry you've missed those opportunities, but I'm delighted you're here for this interview. So thank you so much for that.
Glad to be here.
Over a year ago when we interviewed you, we had the topic of the hierarchy of caring, how children develop a capacity for relationship. And at the beginning of that interview, just as we were starting to talk, I asked you what you were hungering to know more about right now. And you gave this amazing reply about your ongoing research into play. That has me and many of our listeners eager to know more. So that's where we want to go today. Dr. Neufeld, you talk about there being 7 properties of true play. And the emphasis on true implies to me that play is qualitative. So maybe that's a place to start. What drives you and researchers around the world to qualify play now?
Well, to do research on anything, you've got to be able to define it. So that drives it from the science end of it. What are we really talking about? From a word meanings point, it's trying to bring to the essence the construct of play in every single culture and every single language. And so you try to figure out, okay, what does it mean here? The word has got abused, misused, it has got stretched. So when we talk about true play, we're talking about the kind of play that takes care of our emotions, the kind of play that opens doors to our potential, the kind of play that takes care of us. So scholars of play are busy trying to figure out what are these properties, and these are the 7 properties that make sense to me.
Okay. So this kind of play is so important. Before we jump into hearing about those 7 properties of true play, I'm just wondering if can an adult introduce true play to a child, or does a child have to find it themselves?
Children will engage in play as long as the conditions are conducive. It comes from the inside out. It's an absolute need for the child to play. So if the child feels secure enough, if home base is secure enough, just think of other mammals, for instance. If you saw a picture frame and you saw in that frame, let's say some wolf cubs playing with each other, wonderfully playing with each other, you intuitively know that the mother wolf is nearby and they can smell the mother wolf and that they are secure in this. Even though the frame doesn't include this, you know intuitively that no wolf cub could be free to play unless their survival needs were taken care of. And so that's exactly what it is for us too. A child must have a sense that there's a certain security in the contact and closeness, the love and attention and so on. When that's there, the child will spontaneously go into play. We're wired to do so. You can't teach play. You can't command play. You can't say even to yourself, I'm going to be playful today, and that be true.
Yeah.
You can't do that. Play isn't like that. You can't shape it. You can't reinforce it. If you reinforce play, it makes it go away. You can't
fake it.
You can't reward for it. You can't fake it. Well, if you fake it, it doesn't count for real.
Yeah.
Play is nature's instrument. It's nature incognito. You don't have any control over it. What you have to do is find the playfulness inside of you. Now, the playfulness inside of you may help prime the playfulness inside of another, but it's really the magic of the universe.
We're going to take a long time to get through these 7 properties because there's so much to ask you about. Like, say you have a family and the parents are attached with their kids, like the example with the wolves. So they set up an environment that's very conducive to play. Is it fair to say that you might have one child that plays with a high level of imagination engagement and another one that is less so just because of their character, of their personality?
Oh, absolutely.
So, and that doesn't necessarily mean one child is suffering more than the other. It's just more affected by their personality.
Absolutely. If we're physical, we tend to use physical means. If we're very verbal, words will be important to us. Play with words will be very important to us. It's what engages us. But in all of this, what takes care of us primarily is that our emotions have to come out to play for us to feel them. And so key to everything is emotions. Emotions have been dismissed for such a long time. We used to think of rest as when you sleep, but emotions don't rest while you're asleep. Emotions are in charge of your dreams, and emotions are also in charge of your memory. And so where do emotions rest? Well, it turns out that emotions seek rest in play. They have to come out to play where it doesn't count for real. We're getting ahead to some of our properties here, so we'll have to go back. But for one child, it may be in their imagination, and another child, it may be on the swing when their emotions come and they can feel what they're experiencing. So children vary tremendously, and we will vary developmentally as we get older. The kind of play that can serve where we are emotionally.
Okay, we'll get to those things. And these are the reasons why we need to play.
Oh, yes. We absolutely need to play. When you put the pieces together, you find that the very first indicator of a loss of emotional health and well-being is a loss of playfulness. You can feel it in yourself. Yeah. Playfulness, we find, is the key indicator we know for a child when they're in trouble, for a baby when they're in trouble. Playfulness is the number one indicator of emotional health and well-being. And ironically, it's the number one avenue to emotional health and well-being. And so this is so important.
Thanks for answering those questions. So knowing that play is so important, can you now walk us through the 7 properties of true play?
Yes, we'll take them one by one, and I'll try to describe them. First of all, play is engaging. You're not thinking of outcome. You're not conscious of outcome. Now, some people think of play as fun. You need to be happy. That's not necessarily true. Play engages. For instance, sadness usually is an aversive experience to most of us. Most of us would rather not feel sad.
Yeah.
But oh my goodness, in play does sadness feel sweet.
Can you give an example of that?
Oh, when you have a melancholy song, a poetry that goes to the quick, when you hear a lullaby, that slow, lulling, heartbeat kind of thing, the first music ever that we have history of was a lullaby. Even the structure of it is to access any kind of sadness in you, because the sadness is required to let go. And what does a child need to let go of when they go to sleep? They need to let go of holding on. They need to let go of the day, all the activities. In one of the East Indian languages, in Hindi, I believe, sleep is called the little death. And of course, that's exactly what it is. You go into the separation. The lullaby, it engages. So you're not thinking of holding on to mommy. You're not thinking of the contact. You're not thinking of all of this. The word lullaby and lament come from exactly the same root word.
Fascinating.
And so you can see that that's the way we deal with mortality. We have to find that song, that poetry, so we touch it just one step removed and play. Well, Plato actually described it. Plato was the first play theorist in ancient Greece. I love it that it was Plato, you know.
That's just purely coincidental.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But he said it very succinctly. Music can make sadness feel so sweet. And it does. It just engages you. And without this music, without this melancholy, without this poetry, we're left with elevated frustration, with aggression, with polarization. Sadness is required to adapt to anything that we're facing that we cannot control. So it's an emotional process, and play is the medium. It takes care of that emotion in us, and it prepares us and refreshes us for the next day, for being able to again adapt and adjust to those things that we wish we didn't have to adapt to. But that is play.
So you're saying it's not that play needs to be fun or happy to serve us, but that play engages.
It is absolutely self-engaging, and that is important. That's why we can use it. For instance, how do you deal with a child who's skittish, or when they've had bad experiences, when they may qualify for a diagnosis of reactive attachment disorder? How you deal with all of those things for a child who's very hard to collect? Or how do you deal with it when it's just not engaging for a child to be in relationship with you? Well, you add playfulness to yourself, and we do this naturally for any infant. If we're trying to collect the infant, if we're trying to engage the infant, we play. Our voice goes into play, our eyes twinkle, we play. There's smiles on our face, and we act the most playful. You don't act serious to a baby. You play, and play is the secret to the engagement, except that we forget this. The research shows that we actually became attracted, most of us, to our partners because we were playing together. It was the playfulness that engaged us. It's like the ultimate primer. And so this is what I mean is that play, because it's engaging, it makes everything it touches engaging. And that's important because chores aren't engaging. So, what's the key? Well, you add an element of play to it. All the have-tos and the musts aren't engaging. So you say, who can be the first to put their seatbelt on? And you provide an element of play to it. And, oh my goodness, the preschooler, he'll just turn on a dime. Now it's all about play. And it's really the key to behavior management. For a young child, you can get any food into them, can get them to do anything that they're possible of doing by simply using play. And it should be our first go-to instrument because it's like magic. It's absolutely powerful.
Okay, the second distinctive of true play, the second property.
Well, the second distinctive is next in importance. So first of all, we have it's engaging. That is what gives us its power. Second thing is that it's not outcome-based. So what engages us is not where it leads to. What engages us is the activity itself. So as a family, for instance, you may play a board game. And let's say you have 3 children. 2 children are playing that game to win. And they wouldn't play unless they had a big chance of winning. But the third child is just playing for play's sake because it's an opportunity to be with the family and, an opportunity to play. And so it's the activity that engages them, whether they win or lose. And so one person's play may not be the other person's play. You don't really know.
So for those 2 kids that are determined to win, that board game is not a true play situation.
It's not serving the kind of play that is necessary for their development and emotional health.
But the child who's not concerned about the winning is just enjoying it. That is true play for them.
That is true play.
Oh, interesting.
That is true play. So true play Even though there are outcomes to play, and there's phenomenal outcomes to play, you're not conscious of those outcomes.
You're not there for that.
No. And the self-consciousness generally comes because you're afraid of failure or not performing. Playfulness takes away all self-consciousness that is involved. So a playoff game would not be play for most people.
Yeah.
They
really care about the outcome. They want to win.
Care about the outcome. Yeah. I played piano as a kid, and I had classical training. And for the most part, when I so-called played piano, I was playing towards an outcome, right? For a recital or for my teacher to not disappoint them. It was work. Mm-hmm. But I discovered that I could play around on the piano and play for effect and chord changes and all of the effects emotionally that a chord changes and surprises. And suddenly it went into landscape, like emotional scape kind of playing, and could play for hours. But it was not about outcome at all. Mm. Now, did it in effect increase my ability to play at the piano? Yes, it did, but I wasn't conscious of that. Mm. There was no consciousness of outcome at all. And this is the key in school. Mm. Because if you bring play into the curriculum and make it outcome-based and you let your purpose be known, it ruins it.
So what would be an example of that?
Well, as an educator, like in Finland, 1/3 of their curriculum all the way through to high school is play. And that's why the Finnish school system has the highest ratings of all school systems around the world.
So the teacher knows that during this lesson, there are these learning outcomes that will occur, but the child doesn't know what those learning outcomes are.
No. You incorporate through ritual, through culture, you incorporate through various places where there is no consciousness of outcome.
Can you just describe what a lesson would look like that? Because I think that's so foreign to our current educational system.
Let me see if I can go to an example.
Like I'm just thinking, could you even give an example of a math lesson or something?
Oh, yes, math. I had this wonderful math teacher in grade 5 who would come in the morning and play math games with us. There was no marks, and we just had the greatest fun with multiplications, addition. We were all learning to do this, and we never realized it was all play. Oh, if you can play with numbers, you will realize their conservation. You will realize all kinds of things as soon as you play. My teacher allowed me to come to the class early because I was excited about playing with long division. And that's where I figured out the conservation of numbers. But it's in play where you'll make your breakthroughs.
Yeah, I know a lot of card games that you play with kids are games like Yahtzee. You're there for the game, but you're learning great math skills along the way. Now, there is an outcome, though. What if you want to win that Yahtzee game and you're learning math at the same time?
We all want to win.
That's very complicated.
We all want to win. That's not the issue. Winning is a little bit more fun. It's the fact that if you knew you couldn't win, would you still be engaged? That's the key.
That would qualify.
That's the key to education is there is purpose in play, but you must not feel that purpose. For instance, you can't reward play. As soon as you try to praise it, like let's say somebody's playing on the piano, they're making music, you say, oh, wonderful, that was so great, I love it when you do this. You just destroyed the time. You cannot.
Because what does that do in a child's mind when you've said that?
Well, play comes from inside out.
Yeah.
It comes from inside out. As soon as you say that was good, you have revealed your will for the child. You have changed completely the parameters of this. They were playing, and now you said that led to a good outcome, me praising you, me giving you approval. So this whole idea that you praise children for what you like to see, no, if it is a result of play, bite your tongue. Play is not about outcomes.
Yeah. And that goes against a lot of what we want to naturally do as parents is to encourage and praise. And that's not the time and place for that.
That's right.
Yeah. You use the phrase from the inside out. Play comes from the inside out.
Yes. It is expressive. That's one of the distinctives. It is expressive. So it's coming from inside out. It's not about outcomes. The fourth characteristic is
no, but the fourth. So is the third one expressive?
Yes.
Okay, so we just whip through expressive.
We just
like that?
whip right through it.
Okay,
yes. But it's important. Okay, I don't mean by whipping through it's not important. It's incredibly important because we think that entertainment is play. And so much of this, in fact, interferes with true play. When we are stimulation-oriented, when things are coming in, It often interferes with us coming from inside out. Entertainment is from outside in. Stimulation is from outside in. Now, when we are bored, nowadays we have so many things to fill that boredom. I mean, we always had food, but we have all kinds of other things to fill that boredom.
Yeah.
Entertainment, activities, reading, and so on. And so we can use those things to escape the boredom. Now, play theorists believe that boredom, when we didn't have all of these distractions around us, used to be a trigger for play. And that's part of the problem now, because the answer to boredom is not filling the hole with things that come from outside in. The answer to boredom is finding something in to fill the hole and filling the hole from inside out. And so the answer to boredom is in the expressive mode, not the stimulation mode, which is the opposite of what people think.
Yeah.
And so it's so important when our children are bored not to go to the idea of filling that boredom from outside in, but being able to set the stage so something starts coming from inside out. And so then they will automatically move creatively, whether it is art, dance, whether it is singing, whether it is the way they are playing with their toys becomes more creative rather than prescribed. Something is being expressed from inside out. If conditions are conducive, it will be spontaneous. It happens. The problem is that play is not demanding. It needs space.
Yeah.
So a lot of things can interfere with it, including false play. Video games, screenplay are all, for the most part, probably 95% are outcome-based.
Yeah.
And they're not in the expressive mode. So we need to be very careful about this to make sure there is room for things to come from inside out.
As a parent, words like important or careful attached to how my children fill their time, they give me pause. Gordon, can you give an example, even from your own life, of this kind of play?
Yes. For instance, my father wisely, well, he didn't know about this, but he built a swing for me when I was a little kid.
He instinctively knew.
Well, I don't think he knew. I think he just had lots of work to do, and he just needed me to be engaged by something. And so he built this wonderful apparatus, and my favorite part was the swing. But when I came home from school, when my mother felt like she was too smothering, I would go outside and I would be on that swing, and all my feelings would come back on that swing. Well, I have 3 swings at home. I'm 73 years of age. I have hardly ever in my life been without a swing, and I only recently realized what it is that is happening. And I swing, and it's like all the feelings that disappeared during the day come back. You don't normally think of a swing as emotional playground. It is for me. It's solitary. I often go into a humming mode, which is repetitive, and it is a place all of a sudden where all my feelings catch up with me.
So your father inadvertently, it seems, created a play space for your feelings. That's the idea here for what we offer our children.
Exactly. So the idea of here is just simply observing with your child, 2, 3, 4 years of age. It doesn't matter how old they are, where their emotions come out and play, what kind of activity. It's not social, not generally, because the social aspects very much overwhelm the child. It usually has to do with a solitary activity, but where their emotions are coming out, where it's expressive.
Can we rely on that actually happening? Because I'm going to tell you what I'm worried about, that the space for boredom doesn't happen anymore, because the second that you start to feel remotely bored, you pull out your phone or any other screen device. Will play emerge through that? Or is that a barrier?
It tends to be a barrier, and that's where all the concern is. In recent decades, the amount of even play that they can measure, like physical play, is dropping significantly in children. And play theorists are very concerned about the implications developmentally. And so it really does need rituals to protect it.
Rituals. Okay. What are you meaning by rituals?
Rituals is, a time for singing, a time for poetry, a time for reading a story. But the story is chosen not to be a stimulating story, but for the story where the emotions can come out to play in that story. So it's the rituals that protect play because it won't be protected otherwise. And so it's more like protecting the spaces and the places, noticing where the child's emotions come out to play, building rituals around this that happen daily, at least weekly, so that it's protected from the influx, from entertainment, ongoing stimulation, the smartphone, the iPad, from all of these things that our kids are used to now, which really take away from that place.
Now, there's going to be pushback from that, right? Like if you say to your child, this conversation is going to go on forever, I know it. But if you say to your teenager, we're going to create a ritual where you don't have your cell phone around for the next 2 hours, that's not going to be happily received. It's not going to feel playful to them.
Yes.
Can you even?
How do you do this?
How do you do this?
I don't think it's easy in our world to be able to do this. It's not easy. Jean-Jacques Rousseau said in 1763 that his main concern was that parents should be a buffer to society, giving the child a chance to become their own person before they were overcome with the pressures of conformity.
Yeah.
But you ask me how, I'm glad I'm not a parent today. I don't know the answers to it. I only know that it is important to do. Yeah. I don't know how
it's complicated.
Yeah,
it is really complicated.
It is difficult, but the fact is that this is really, really important. We have intuitions within ourselves. When we feel playful, where do we go to? What do we need? We all have playgrounds in our past that we needed for our emotions. Many of us have lost these. We didn't know that they were important. And so it's organic. It's organic. It is bringing in this desire, the yearning for it, the love of it, finding out where it comes out in us, where it comes out in our children, and to know that play will build the brains that school will use. But it's that play where the answers lie.
Okay, let's keep going. So we've got engaging, not outcome-based, not work. Expressive.
Yes.
What's the fourth? Distinctive.
Not for real.
Okay.
But it doesn't count. It's just not for real. And so you mustn't use that time of play to correct their behavior, because if you make it work-based, you destroy the play. So just give you an example. You have two sisters who are sisters in real life, but now they're playing being sisters. Do you follow me?
Yeah, I did that with my sisters.
All right. So we're playing being sisters. And in playing being sisters, you're yelling at each other, right?
Okay.
So mom or dad hear this, say, come on, girls, get along. Don't be so mean. Okay.
I have done that to my kids.
Both girls will erupt and say, we're only playing.
Yeah.
In other words, it doesn't count. It doesn't count. See, and that's the beauty of play, is it doesn't count. And when it doesn't count, our brain is at its best. That's why a lot of the leading places like BMW and Google, they are now incorporating play in all of their problem solving, because when it doesn't count, you are at your most creative. You get new ideas. Your brain is optimized. And so it can be in your imagination. It can be hypothetical. All kinds of things, but it doesn't count for real. And so it's important for us to not ruin that by trying to do,
a solution or a moral lesson or something. Yeah,
exactly. In that place, it doesn't count. So let's say if you had a child who was starting to insult you, like you poo-poo face, I hate you, and so on. Right? One of the ways you could give room for those emotions is bring it into play. There's a time and a place for this. Think of all your best words you can call me, and then you give the signal, okay, and then you go, and so then it comes in play, but it doesn't count. The child gets his emotions out, there's a purpose, they're free of it, but it doesn't count for real. And of course, this is where we create poetry which is way too dramatic. We create this music. We do all of these things in plays. We overstate our emotions. It doesn't count. It gives us our chance to get it out. When I was working with kids in prison, I would introduce them to these different emotional playgrounds, rap, poetry, all of these kinds of things that they could do to get it out because it didn't count. And it's what is necessary in that place, that the emotions that are difficult for us, that are too much for us, that would hurt our loved ones, they all need to get out, and play is the answer.
Can I just ask you a question on that? I'm going back to teenage kids because this is the reality of my life right now. So what about listening to music that's got harsh words in it? Is that because they're needing an opportunity to have that kind of expression? Because a lot of rap music has got a lot of harshness in it.
Well, it does.
Okay.
The problem with a lot of music is if you've got a bit of frustration in you and you listen to the way somebody else has formed it, with attitudes and words that are misogynistic, that are violent and so on, it shapes the person's own way of thinking. So there's a downside to this, is that it can also shape a way of expression that is not in their best interest. It is always better for it to go to the inside out. Does it serve some function? Undoubtedly it does. But it also has this downside in that it spreads ways for kids who are peer-oriented and not adult-oriented, who aren't taking their cues from how they talk, and they are taking their cues from others. It leads to a violence that really was unnecessary. There's all kinds of ways of expressing frustration without using that kind of language, without those kinds of attitudes and that kind of attack.
So perhaps for the artists, when they created it as therapy for themselves.
Yes, it would be nice if it would have kept it to themselves.
Gotcha.
It really would have.
Gotcha.
And not visited and all the people who worship them, and then use it for themselves.
Yeah.
But it probably served a function for themselves.
Well, I think often when you look back at the artist's lives, it has.
Yes, absolutely it has a place. But it can also give ideas to the listener that they never had.
I'm Rachel Cram. Thanks for listening to Family 360. We hope you're enjoying our conversation with Dr. Neufeld. Our next episode explores mindfulness and resilience in the face of stress and adversity with adolescent specialist Dr. Zoom Vo. Please join us for another conversation exploring life together. And now back to Dr. Gordon Neufeld and the remaining 3 properties of true play. Okay. We've got 3 more to go. So we have number 1, it has to be engaging. Number 2, not outcome-based, not work. Number 3, it needs to be expressive. Number 4, not for real. And so now here we go into number 5, safe.
Yes. You feel safe when you're in play. And feeling safe is really important for the brain to function properly, for all kinds of things to function properly. Now, if somebody hurts their feelings, that is the end of play.
Right, okay.
That's the end of play. For instance, take the exchange of wit, repartee. My wife is incredible at repartee. She was the youngest child, and she got teased a lot, and so she
learned how to give it back.
Incredibly. I'm not so good at it. And so when she goes into repartee, my feelings get hurt sooner than later, and that's the end of the play for me. It is, oh my goodness, it isn't there. But that's an example. It has to be mutual. The safety always has to be mutual. If there's more than one playing, it needs to be kept safe for the play to continue, because safety is inherent to play. And that's important because it helps reduce our alarm. So when we get into that playful place, the alarm goes away. And that's, again, the lullaby, the power of the lullaby and the lament. In that lament, in the music, in the lullaby, it is alarm-free. And that's incredible. Because when you're alarmed, you can't feel anything else. There's nothing else you can feel. You can't feel the shape of the hole in you. You can't feel your joy. You can't feel anything. Alarm just kind of trumps everything. And when you have this space, it makes it free for all the other feelings to come that are there. It brings all of them back because alarm chases all of them away. Our children are becoming more alarmed. All the diagnoses are more anxious. They're more adrenaline-based. All the manifestations of alarm. Well, they're losing their place of play.
Yeah.
And so they need to find this place. Video games will distract them, but for the most part, screen games are based upon an agitated attention that says, we know you're alarmed. This is what will trigger off of. So it doesn't free you from this place. There's not the place of calm inside. Only true play can give you that place.
Can I ask you a question on that? You started off talking about we can be in situations where we're actually in danger, but play can make us feel safe.
Yes.
Is the inverse also true? We can actually be in places of safety, but we can play at danger.
Yes, but it's not for real.
It's not for real, but then are you kind of practicing it in a way? Like I think I'm picturing my kids, like they like playing games where something's attacking them and they're running and they're hiding.
That's a favorite game.
Yeah.
And again, that's so important because it gets the brain used to a certain level of alarm that is not for real. My third daughter used to play a game. We live right by a ravine. And the worst fears, of course, are walking as a teenager and the woods are all the way around. Well, they used to take turns in the dark chasing each other. And they would be screaming, knowing, of course, it was just play. Yeah. But they were, in a sense, trying to deal with the alarm that comes of a place that's very dangerous. But when you did it in play, it helps equip you, helps prepare you for that place. So yes, when play is safe, you are more likely then to be able to play with your fears in a way that doesn't spook you.
Often young children create a similar tension to what you're describing with your daughter. They'll want to be chased. They'll say, yes, chase me. That's part of that, isn't it?
It's all part of it.
Yeah.
It's all part of it. And that's their favorite game. In fact, our two youngest, the two boys, every single night I was at home, we played a version of Monster. We had carpet samples, and I was always a monster. And then they would try to get from one of these safe places, the rug sample, to the other without me catching them. We would play hours, and they wanted to play it every single night.
Wow, what a great game. All right, so number 6, true play is freely entered.
Yes, the will is preserved. Freedom. When you think of a child, the will of their parents, their teachers, everyone is always imposing them. Their wishes, desires, their agendas. In play, your will is preserved. And it's freely entered. Nobody can make you play. And we can't make ourselves play. But because it's freely entered, there is no counter will in play. Now, one of the biggest instincts we have is to counter the will of others when we feel it coercive, when it's pushing down on us. Go to bed. No, I don't want to. Do this. It's there. In play, there is no resistance. My youngest grandson is still at an age where he can do these things. I'm not going to eat it. No, I'm not. I won't do it. And then you bring play into it. And I bet you it would disappear in one bite. And then it's gone in one bite, and you've got this. And there's no counter will. And he's absolutely determined he's not going to give in to the will of his grandmother. And then a little bit of play, and there's no counter will at all. It's gone.
Now, this requires parents to be able to know how to play themselves, right? Because to come up with that idea of, I bet that's going to be gone in one bite, you have to have an understanding of play yourself as a parent.
At least you need to be able to act playful, Like when you collect a baby, I don't know that you have to be playful, but you have to know how to bring play into your eyes, the twinkle in your eyes. Your voice has to become playful to engage the baby because they will only naturally engage in the play mode. So I think most of us intuitively know you can never do life straight with kids. So if you've lost your own playfulness, the thing about it is as parents, we can be under a whole lot of stress. We could have lost our playfulness. We can be depressed. But if we can remember what it's like to be playful, we can act playful enough for whatever it takes to engage our children. And that's what's important. So yes, ideally speaking, we should know when we're in trouble, when we've lost our own playfulness. And we've got to get our play back.
Well, how do you get it back? How do you get your play back?
Well, the research shows that a depressive person in the play mode, the changes in the brain within half an hour are phenomenal. The play mode is the opposite of depression. So we need it. As adults, we need it. The older we get, the more we need it. So we need to find this, but do we need to be playful? I don't think so. I mean, we don't need to be, we need to act playful enough to engage our children.
Well, so often when things go south, it's when we just do not have time for that. It's we got to get out the door now quickly. Or
exactly.
Yeah.
We reveal our agendas, which is our mistake. We think, okay, we're going to be honest with our children. I need you to do this. I need you to do that. The worst possible scenario. First of all, the child wasn't born to fulfill our needs.
Yeah, but
So
you think
what
they are
we
in those
thinking
moments.
of?
Yeah.
We're supposed to be for children, not children for us. Secondly, it reveals our will to them, which is very dangerous because it brings out their counter will. Now, that's the last thing they want to do. And thirdly, it's just, again, life isn't straight. You can't do this. That's why we have poetry. That's why everything is indirect. We have to figure out, I want the child to set the table. Okay, well, I have two choices. I can engage the attachment instincts, get them to smile, nod, and so on. And while they're nodding, say, I'd really like it if you would set the table now. Now, if the child is very attached to us and there's no defenses in the way, most likely that will work.
Yeah.
Or I have to inject a bit of play in it. Really, I only have those two choices. And if I can't figure out one of those two, I'm going to trip over my child. Their eyes will roll, they'll balk, they'll work to rule, it won't get done the way we want to do it, or we'll have such a dutiful child that they lose their old play. And so the child becomes depressed, but good, and does what he's told to do, but there's no life in the child. So again, we have to figure this out on our part of it before we blurt out our agendas.
This is a very different way of parenting than perhaps most of us were raised that are parents now.
Yes.
So it's a very different way to think. Okay, so important. Okay, we're on to the seventh one then, which you've already talked about a little bit, but it needs to be in parameters.
Yes. There needs to be a beginning and an end. And so there is some kind of signal. If you watch your pet, watch your dog, a dog is very clear about the signal. They have this kind of play bow that they do, this kind of prance. They often watch you to see if there's a play signal that is there, and then you get to play together.
Yeah.
And the dog is so excited to be able to play. We had a dog and cat who would play for hours a day, but they had signals, and the cat would signal when the play was over. There's quite a few mammals that have figured out a language that they can play together. And there's all kinds of evidence that they've got these kind of play signals. Because we've been so work-based in our society, we have forgotten those basic play signals. Like when you want to play with your partner, how do you do it? What is it that you do? Is it a bit of silliness that you do? Do you say something you really don't mean and they know you don't mean? And so it says to them, okay, we're playing. And so it's time for repartee or it's time for those kinds of things. But you've noticed what it is and then how is it over? And you begin to watch the play signals we have. And then it's very important to find this with your child. Because we have serious parenting to do, and we're not always playful in it. But when we're in the play mode and when we're inviting them to play, what are our signals there?
Yeah.
And so we signal in and we signal out. So they're clear parameters.
Okay, so number 7, clear parameters. Got that. So these are the 7 distinctives of true play. And you say the more an activity approximates these 7 properties, the more it carries with it the ability to take care of our emotions.
That's right.
And to grow us as nature intends us to grow.
Yes.
Do you want to do a quick recap, a quick run through of the list?
Sure.
Okay.
So from the top, it's engaging. It's not work. It's not outcome based. It's expressive. It's not for real. It is safe. The will is preserved. And it's within a set parameters. There's a beginning and an end. So this is how nature takes care of us. This is where healing is. Manifest these 7 properties of play.
So I'm wondering, are there indicators that true play is underexperienced in someone's life? I think as a parent listening, you might think, well, I don't know if my child's getting enough opportunities for this. I want this for them, of course, so desperately. How would we know by looking at our child or looking at ourselves that our life is not giving us enough of that kind of opportunity?
Well, the 3 telltale signs, the 3 indicators, first of all, is the degree of playfulness. And so the way of thinking about it is, do you see playfulness there? Or is there a lack of play? The second indicator is rest. If there is restlessness, you know that the child is in trouble emotionally.
What does that look like?
Restlessness, a child who's continually restless, you know that state of agitation. We need rest. Our brain needs rest. We have a whole rest mode in our system, and play is part of that rest mode. That restlessness is an indicator of a system under strain, a system under stress. The child needs more play. So if they're not playful, they need more play. If they're restless, they need more play. And if they've lost their feelings. Children need to feel what they experience. And we generally think of feelings as synonymous with emotions, but they're not. Feelings, like think of being tired. You have to feel rather safe before you can feel your tiredness. You can be hungry and not know it until you're safe, and then you can feel your hunger. For a young child, for instance, a 3-year-old, they need to feel their bladder pressure. If they don't feel their bladder pressure, they won't be able to know when they have to go pee. And so under times of stress, they'll begin to wet themselves again, or even to soil themselves because they can't feel it. And that's true for us all, in fact, but that is the extreme example of not being able to feel your experience. Now, we're meant to take some stress situationally, but at the end of the day, we need to get our feelings back. That's where play comes in, because play takes care of that. When our emotions can play, we can feel it, and all our feelings will come back. And that's one of the most important functions of play. So these are the 3 basic indicators.
Okay. Gordon, I'm going to try and squeeze in one last question before we close. You're describing these signs of stress for children. Parenting itself is one of those situations of stress, especially when you're in your early years of parenting. So I'm just thinking about the playful parent, the necessity of play in adult life. We do lose our feelings often in those early years as parents. People will say to you, how are you doing? And you say, fine. And you don't realize you're exhausted. You don't realize you're hungry. You don't realize that you've lost your own play. Is there any key pieces of advice that you could give to parents in a time of life where it feels like there's no time?
Well, if we need to make time for anything, it would be this. Far more important than trying to get ahead, far more important than to try and solve every problem, is to know that we can't do this day in and day out. And when we start losing our feelings, we are courting depression. We are courting a numbness. And when we're saying fine because we remember that's what we should say, when we're beginning to feel the effects of stress, it's important. We don't need a lot of time. It's these rituals. I've had clients who are in rough shape, really taken out by what life threw at them. And the best way I could help them was to find what it was that had worked for them. Like, were you a dancer? Did you respond to music? Were you painting? Was the theater? Was the drama? Was it a book that you would engage yourself? You know, half an hour a week, start small, but protect it with a ritual. I couldn't think of anything more important. It's free. You know, you don't have to pay a therapist big money for this. It is natural. It is already in you. There's something that will respond deep within. But nothing could be more important, because I don't think anything is more difficult than to parent when you've lost your playfulness. Then it's just sheer work.
And an incredibly lonely spot to be as well. Well, as you were talking, there were so many rabbit trails that I just so wanted to chase, because this is such a rich conversation. But I think that we will wrap it up now, because we've been talking for a long time. I am so appreciative of this conversation. Dr. Neufeld, thank you so much for your time.
Well, I enjoy sharing this material. Obviously, I'm excited about it. I think it's just the best discovery ever. It always was there. It always will be. But being able to bring it to the forefront of our mind and realize that we need to preserve it. So Thank you for the opportunity to share.
So, Roy, with this description of True Play now firmly in your mind after working on the production of this episode for 2 weeks, do you think you have enough play happening in your life?
Well, you're kind of putting me in the spot here.
I know, but I feel like as a musician, at least, you must be experiencing some of the solid emotional rest through play.
Absolutely. Like Gordon was mentioning about playing the piano. That is definitely true play for me.
And the guitar and all the other instruments you play, like the accordion, although you do take a fair amount of teasing for your accordion.
I do, but I love the accordion. It's definitely play for me.
It comes from the inside out. You feel safe?
Yes, even with an accordion.
Well, you certainly appear playful as you squeeze it in and out. And you played the accordion for the song you created for this episode.
Yes, well, I was inspired by Dr. Neufeld's comments on how lullabies engage our emotions so we can go into the separation of sleep.
And that birthed a song, a lovely lullaby for your granddaughter, Sage.
Yeah, my new granddaughter.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed that. And to answer your original question, creating music is often true play for me.
And we are going to end with Sage's lullaby. So listen and enjoy.
And don't fall asleep. Our deep thank you to Dr. Neufeld for this conversation.
I'm Rachel Cram.
I'm Roy Salmond, and thank you so much for listening to Family 360.
We share quotes and links from all our guests on Family 360 on our website, Facebook, and Instagram. Join us.
We'd love to continue the conversation with you.